All right, everyone. My name is Evan Gessner. I'm a civil rights attorney in Lexington, South Carolina. This is my first year judging a We the People national level competition, but I've judged the state competitions here for about the last 12 years or so. I'm excited to be here and can't wait to hear your presentation.
And I am Francine Engel. I'm from the state of Maryland. I'm a political scientist, and I focus on American constitutional development and work with the Maryland Council for Civic and History Education.
My name is Jocelyn Broman. I am a We the People alumni. I participated at Nationals in 2006. I'm also an attorney, and I currently work on Capitol Hill for Representative Don Young of Alaska.
And if you would, please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
My name is Carrie Jackson, and I'm a junior.
My name is Charlotte Donaldson, and I'm a junior.
My name is Rashad Brima, and I'm a junior.
My name is Lindsay Bader, and I'm a junior.
And my name is Ben Getchis. I'm a junior, and our teachers are Matthew Fulford and Mandy Hostetter.
All right, great. We got Unit 3, question number 2. John Adams once said, "There is nothing I dread so much as a division of the Republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader and in opposition to each other." What issues led to the formation of the original political parties? To what extent have those issues persisted in American political parties? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of a unified or divided government? You can begin whenever you're ready.
The founders disapproved of factions, the predecessor of political parties, because of their familiarity with division in 17th century English civil wars. President George Washington declared in his farewell address of 1796 that factions may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely to become potent engines for conflict. James Madison held similar views, but argued in Federalist 10 that a rule by a majority faction in America was unlikely. Due to the Republic's large size, Madison thought it would be difficult for a faction to gain majority support, and also argued that representative democracy would encourage compromise instead of domination. However, Madison's hopes didn't last.
A dividing issue during Washington's presidency was the role the federal government had to repay Revolutionary debt. Alexander Hamilton wanted to repay this debt through tariffs by a national bank. Although the Constitution doesn't mention a bank, Hamilton argued that Article 1, Section 8 allowed Congress to create one. Thomas Jefferson disagreed because he thought Hamilton's plan deeply involved private businesses in the affair of the new federal government. In this disagreement, Hamilton and his supporters, who called themselves Federalists, prevailed. Jefferson and those who had opposed Hamilton's bank plan became the Democratic Republicans. These factions in the making further disagreed on foreign policy during Washington's presidency.
In particular, Washington directed Chief Justice John Jay to negotiate a treaty with Britain, who was at war with France. Thomas Jefferson and others who were more sympathetic to France objected to the Jay Treaty, arguing it weakened trade rights. Supporters of Jefferson created Democratic Republican clubs to rally against policies like the Jay Treaty and the bank. These clubs became the first established party of the US under the name Republicans. In response, Hamilton's supporters became the Federalist Party. Disagreements about the division of power between the national and state government have persisted since the founding, including the major issues of voting and the economy. Voting was largely a state issue until the Civil War, which required federal intervention to ensure suffrage on the basis of race. Southern states, presently connected to the Republican Party, advocated for a smaller role of federal government in enacting voting laws. After Reconstruction, the South resisted and regained power by enacting new legislation. Eventually, the civil rights movement pressured the federal government to regain power.
Since then, Republicans' push for federal intervention has succeeded, with Shelby County v. Holder 2013 expanding state jurisdiction for voting laws. However, the decision might be undermined with the For the People Act bill passed by the House in March, which has created partisan disagreement, authorizing federal power to make voting more uniform across state lines. The bill is endorsed by Democrats, but Republicans contend to leave this power to the states. Disagreements about the federal government's role in the economy has been another issue between parties since Hamilton's first Bank of America. Generally, Democrats argue for a larger role of the federal government to eliminate income inequality and to foster growth. This was seen during the Great Depression in FDR's controversial New Deal policies, and recently on Democratic President Biden's COVID relief budget reconciliation bill, which avoids the use of the filibuster. Republicans argue that parts of the bill are less about relief, more about Democratic agendas.
A unified government is where the same party controls both branches of Congress and the presidency. On the contrary, divided government is when that control is split between parties. The advantages of a unified government are that it cuts through the disorder of government institutions. It also focuses on authority and accountability in a single party. It helps clarify and completely oppose the interests of competing parties, providing a clear choice for voters. Although a unified government has a strong disadvantage in that oversight of the executive is much less effective. On the other hand, the key advantage of a divided government is that it incentivizes cooperation and compromise in the government. Both parties need to agree to pass legislation, so policies appeal more towards the middle ground during divided terms. The main disadvantage, though, is that a divided term can lead to less accountability and potential gridlock because of refusal to cooperate. We're now open for questions.
All right, great, thank you. So tell me, does a single party's dominance at the state or local level government have any effect on the federal government?
I think it certainly does play a substantial role there. But however, because each state has very limited power in the federal government, I think the scope of that power that a single party would have is much more limited. What's far more important is whether a party has control of the executive branch as well as both houses of Congress.
To also add on to my colleague, if a political party holds the majority in a state or local government, it's more likely for the state legislator who is redistricting lines for voting to redistrict them to favor his or her party.
Okay, could you explain to me what a faction is, and then tell me, is a faction the same thing as a political party?
Faction was a term used by the founding fathers, and it basically is similar to the term political parties, except factions focused on economic issues more than social issues, which political parties focus more on now.
And statesman Edmund Burke said in 1770 that parties act on principle, whereas factions act on single interest. And I think that summarizes Charlotte's point.
To also add on to my colleagues, factions, the founders' perception of factions more closely represent interest groups today. However, it's the closest to how we view political parties and how founders viewed political parties. But to also add on to my colleagues that factions are the closest resemblance to political parties today.
Okay, so how is the political party different? So I think you tried to explain factions. How is that different from a political party? What does a political party do or have that a faction doesn't?
A political party, as we see today, represents more of identity rather than policies and belief. And factions more closely represented policies and belief and what people thought the government should do. But today we see it as more of an identity thing between political lines.
I would actually disagree with my colleague here. I think that parties in the term of the United States reflect this idea of intent, because parties end up encompassing a lot more views than just a single issue like factions did back in the day. And this is because the United States is in a two-party system, and it's most advantageous for a party to garner multiple points of view and gain more votes and thus more seats in the House.
To add on to my colleague, the parties have changed from the founding, as when we've seen that they previously were more focused on policy issues, while today they are more focused on economic and social issues. That's one thing that's differentiated the parties of today from former parties.
Adding on to my panel member, I feel as if political parties seek to win elections and operate different sources of government. I feel as if factions really influence public policy. And while political parties are like public organizations, they have views on different wide range of political issues.
So let's turn more to the unified and divided government. You guys did a good job of explaining the pros and cons. Which divided government or unified government works better for the United States?
I mean, ideally, a unified government would sound like it would work better. Everybody is connected in the same issues and everybody has the same ideas. But a divided government has seemed to work better for our country because everybody gets to have their opinion about the side and be able to debate it and talk it out and come to an agreement.
Some evidence to point towards that was a New York Times study in 2020, which found that in a unified government, congressional majority policy or parties failed on 43% of their agenda priorities. In a divided government, the number was 49%. We really don't see this huge increase in policies passing under united government. And this is mostly attributed to the tent nature of a parties, like I touched on earlier. Since the party encompasses a lot of different views, it's hard to maintain one similar idea and agenda throughout the entire party.
Additionally, as we could see at the beginning of President Obama's first term when there was unified government, it was very difficult to be able to pass anything, as the division caused the minority party to really be staunch in their differences and not try to cooperate.
So, do you think the United States people, the citizens that elect all of the federal government elected officials, do you actually think that they want divided government, or do you think that they want unified government?
Well, I would argue in a perfect world, everybody would support divided government because it would support collaboration across multiple parties and ensure nobody's voice is left unheard. However, due to the nature of the United States and the increase of hyperpartisanship, that leads to a lot of disadvantages, including gridlock and refusal to cooperate. And I think because of that, a unified government better suits the United States.
Also, to add on to my colleague, politicians do root for a unified government. However, a divided government actually represents what the founders wanted more in American government, as to facilitate compromise rather than pushing through an agenda.
To add on to my colleague, the founders feared tyranny. And in a unified government, this could easily happen as one party may control the entire government and run rampant with their decision-making, leading to overall tyranny.
So you mentioned that the founders actually preferred divided government and they were fearful of tyranny. So do you think that the founding fathers would think that we'd be better off if we had a president and a vice president from two different political parties?
Sure, I think that reflects an oversight that they didn't see when making the Constitution. And this happened in the 1800 election when people didn't know who to vote as far as president and vice president and saw a direct tie. And I think ideally, in the founders' eyes, they thought voting for a separate vice president would allow for cooperation in the executive branch. However, as the United States has developed, we've realized that the power of a unitary executive cannot be overlooked. And so having the vice president be in support of the president's ideas and in support of the policies that the president passes ends up being better for an executive branch as a whole.
So let's talk about elections a little bit. How does the winner take all system of electors impact political parties, particularly in the United States?
Sure, we are very against the first past the post winner take all system. Really, the reason why we oppose it is it really only allows for two parties to flourish. That's because it would be a waste of a vote to vote for a different party. A third of America is claiming that they're independent now. We need to allow for more parties to succeed, and that's where we advocate for ranked choice voting. We've seen 428 ranked choice voting elections since 2004, and we've seen some in our home state with Telluride. And what happens is when we have ranked choice voting, we see not only more votes for other parties, we also see a general increase in voter turnout. And that's on net what we need to make sure that the United States representatives are representing the people.
Ring time. Oh,
John.
I'm sorry. I don't make the rules.
Oh, great job, guys. So.
Yeah, really. We want to recognize the students for their hard work today and their participation.
Yeah, you guys did great.
Sorry, I was on mute there. You're really great job, everyone. Looking through my notes, I noticed you all brought up at least, well, several times, the kind of the key difference between our two parties that we have in our country is the large government versus small government. And that's really what tracks from beginning to end. You know, there's been some realignments here and there, and issue by issue. It might not be predictable necessarily, but you clued in on that it's the big government versus small government, federal power versus state rights. That's really what drives the political debate in this country. But great job, great presentation. I can tell you all individually put a lot of work into this, and you really understand what we're talking about. And you all seem to have worked together as a team to put together a great presentation with even participation. So great job, everyone.
Yeah, I thought you did a wonderful job talking about unified and divided government, not only in your presentation, which I thought you had very clear definitions and did a great job talking about the pros and cons with that. But then even in the follow-up, you did, had a lot of examples where, you talked about how initially it seems like unified would be the better way to go, but then you had the New York Times study that you brought up to sort of show that they're actually more effective in divided government. So that was good. And then you also brought up the, winner take all system and, how it only allows for the two-party system, which I thought was good that you made that connection. And then, I like how you offered an alternative that, wasn't even suggested to you with the ranked choice voting, and then had a nice support for why you support that idea. So very well done. Very well done.
Yeah, I'll echo my colleagues. You did a great job of talking us through debt, foreign policy, voting, central power, economic power, like all that in your statement. You carried that through very well. One thing I keep forgetting about this, and I want to call it out because we hadn't heard it. We may have heard it only one other time today, is that parties are here to win elections. So I think is it Carrie or Kari?
It's Carrie.
Carrie. Okay. Well, Carrie, you hit that. And it's like, I think we kind of forget about that. So I specifically wanted to call that out and just be like, of course, that's when you were talking about the factions and the parties, like parties are here as a structure to win elections. Like that is their goal. That's, in some cases, that seems to be the only goal. But it's one of those things that I think we forget about when we start talking about parties and factions and we get into policy. That's one of the main roles of a political party is to win elections so that you can govern and you can do the policies, but you can't do any of that unless you win the election. So we hadn't heard that maybe one other time today. So I just want to call that out as like very good. And the redistricting thing was new I think that was the first time we had heard that in regards to the state level impacts onto a national level. And it was a all around very good discussion of everything. So excellent job, everyone.
Thank you for judging.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, judges, for your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you.